Why is everything so political these days? It really feels like every single choice you make, from the coffee you buy to the shows you stream, has become some kind of political statement. Well, if you feel that way, it's not just in your head. The data is clear. We are more divided than ever. And that trend, it's speeding up.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a number that should honestly make you pause. 30%. Right now, among our youngest voters, Gen Z, there is a 30-point political gap between men and women. That's not just a small disagreement, that's a canyon. And believe it or not, that's just one piece of a much bigger, much more complicated puzzle that we're going to unpack.
So, to really get a handle on what's going on, we are going to dive into a landmark report called The Great Divergence. This thing uses a mountain of data to try and pinpoint the real forces that have split us into what feels like two completely separate, opposing teams.
And the main takeaway from the report is this: that whole idea of appealing to the moderate, centrist voter to win, yeah, that's over. The political center has pretty much evaporated. It's left this huge vacuum that's now filled by identity and grievance. The old rules are gone. We need a totally new map to figure out where we're going.
So where do we even begin to understand this? Well, the report says the foundation for a lot of this division starts with something we all get: money. Or more specifically, the massive gaping chasm between the people at the very top and, well, everyone else.
I mean, the scale of this change is just staggering. Back in 1965, a CEO made about 21 times what their average employee did. You fast forward to today, and that number has just exploded, regularly sitting in the hundreds. This isn't just some boring economic statistic. For a lot of people, it's a daily, in-your-face reminder of a system that feels fundamentally broken.
And that feeling? It actually has a name: relative deprivation. It's not about being poor, not really. It's about that psychological sting you feel when you think you're playing by all the rules, but you still see this managerial elite in the big cities pulling light years ahead while your town gets left in the dust. That feeling of being unfairly lapped in a race you're trying to win, it is absolute political dynamite.
But here's where the report really flips the script. It argues that while economics might have set the stage, the real drama, the main event of our division, is now about culture. The old battle lines of class, the ones based on how much you earn, they've been completely turned upside down.
And this slide just shows that inversion perfectly. Think about this for a second. A plumber who's pulling in six figures is now statistically way more likely to vote for the right. Meanwhile, a university professor making a fraction of that salary is almost guaranteed to vote for the left. It's not about your paycheck anymore, it's about your diploma and where you got it.
Okay, next up is another huge cultural dividing line: the God gap. The space between the secular and the religious isn't a gap anymore, it's a chasm. People with no religious affiliation, they're often called the knowns, are a bedrock of the left's coalition. And on the flip side, those who go to church every week are one of the most solid voting blocks for the right.
And it's not just what we believe, it's where we live. Our zip codes have become these incredibly accurate predictors of our political tribe. The dense cities have become fortresses for the left, while the wide-open rural areas are strongholds for the right. And this physical sorting, this separation, creates what the report calls place-based resentment, where each side doesn't just disagree with the other, they're deeply suspicious of their entire world.
So you've got these deep cracks forming, based on money and culture. But what's actively pouring gasoline on the fire? The report points to a few key forces. It calls them accelerants that are just fanning the flames and making everything worse.
And this brings us right back to that shocking 30-point gap we started with. The report gives it a name: the gender scissors. Over the last decade or so, the political views of young men and young women have just dramatically sliced apart. Young women have become way more liberal, while young men have kind of stayed put or even drifted a little to the right. This has created a gap inside of a single generation that we have never, ever seen before.
At the exact same time, we've basically stopped sharing a common set of facts. Most people get their news from sources that do little more than tell them they're right. And that little slice in the middle, the people who actually look at a mix of sources, it's tiny. We are, for all intents and purposes, living in completely separate information universes.
Now, the report has a super nerdy name for this: algorithmic epistemologies. It's a mouthful, I know, but what it means is simple. Our social media feeds are literally designed to show us more of what we already believe. This locks us into these echo chambers where compromise is impossible because the other side doesn't just seem wrong, they seem like they're living on a different planet.
Okay,
So we've looked at all these different pieces: the wage gap, the diploma divide, gender, where we live, our media diets. But if you had to boil it all down, what's the real engine of this division? Which of these things actually matters most? Well, to figure that out, the report ran a massive statistical analysis.
All right, coming in at number 3, religiosity. It's simple. How often a person goes to a religious service is a huge predictor of their politics, and it has nothing to do with how much money they make.
The second most powerful factor? A person's views on immigration. This has become what the report calls a master variable. It's this one single issue that connects to all these deep feelings about national identity, security, and cultural change.
And the number one, the single strongest predictor of how an American votes today is not how much money is in their bank account, it is their level of education. That diploma divide has become the absolute central defining axis of American politics.
This table just lays it all out in black and white. Just look at the raw predictive power of education at the top, and then look at the wage gap way down at the bottom. It's not even a contest. The data couldn't be clearer. Culture and education are now overwhelmingly more powerful than pure economics when it comes to sorting us into our political tribes.
So, what does this all add up to? When you stack all of these divides on top of each other, cultural, economic, geographic, the report comes to a really stark and, frankly, deeply unsettling conclusion.
We are, effectively, two different nations that just happen to share the same border. One nation is urban, has a university degree, is mostly secular, and works in fields like healthcare and education. The other nation is more rural, doesn't have a college credential, is religious, and works in the fields that build and fix the physical world. These two groups don't just disagree on taxes, they seem to live in completely different moral universes. I want to end with this one quote, pulled directly from the report's conclusion. It says what we're witnessing is nothing less than a divide between two distinct civilizations sharing a single state. Which really brings us back to where we started. Why is everything so political? Because it's not just about politics anymore. It's about everything.
And all of this leaves us with one final, very difficult question. If we can't even agree on the basic facts of the world we live in, if we no longer share a common reality, how can we possibly share a common future?